All right, let's dive in. Today, we're tackling something that might sound a little dry at first. Software requirements.
Oh, but trust me, it's way more exciting than it sounds.
Right. I mean, you send over this document,
Uh-huh.
and it's actually a lecture
Yeah,
from a university course on software requirements engineering.
it is.
But don't worry, we're going to break it down and make it fun, I promise.
Absolutely. We'll give you the knowledge you need to not just understand, but actually thrive in any software project, really.
Yeah, and the cool thing is this stuff isn't just for, like, hardcore techies.
No, not at all.
Even if you've never, like, written a single line of code.
Exactly.
Understanding this can be a huge advantage, whether you're building an app, you're buying an app.
Or just trying to understand how, the digital world works.
Exactly.
Like behind the scenes, all the magic that goes on.
Okay, so first things first, we got to start with the basics.
Yeah, let's do it.
What is a requirement?
A great question.
Like, what are we even talking about here?
So this document we're looking at defines it as a statement which translates or expresses a need
Okay.
and its associated constraints and conditions.
All right, so,
Kind of a mouthful.
yeah, that's a little jargony.
Is.
Can you give us, like, a real-world example?
Okay, so think of it like building a house, right?
Okay, I like where this is going.
Yeah, you wouldn't just tell the builder, hey, build me a house.
Right.
You'd have some specific needs, wouldn't you?
Oh, for sure, like how many bedrooms you want.
Exactly, the style of the kitchen.
Maybe a hot tub.
Ooh, maybe even a secret passageway, a hidden library,
I love that.
So those are your requirements, and getting them clear up front, that's essential.
Otherwise, you end up with, like, a house full of bathrooms and nowhere to sleep.
Exactly, a very uncomfortable situation.
Not ideal.
Not at all.
So, just like a shaky foundation can doom a building, poorly defined requirements can totally tank a software project.
Yeah, it's all about setting that solid foundation.
Right. And speaking of different types of requirements,
Oh,
this document breaks them down into 4 main categories.
mm-hmm.
And we should probably go through each one.
Let's do it.
So, let's start with business requirements.
The big picture.
These are like the high-level strategic goals.
So why are we even doing this? Questions.
Exactly. These often come from, like, the top, right?
Yeah, the higher-ups, the CEO, the project sponsors, they're the ones usually driving these.
Right. And they set the stage for everything that comes after.
Absolutely. Imagine a company decides to build a new app that they don't really have their business goals clear.
Oh.
They might end up with this fantastic piece of software that nobody actually needs or uses.
Oh, that's sad.
Right? Like a software graveyard just sitting there.
Yeah, totally useless.
So this lecture gives a great example of a clear business requirement. I'll read it here.
Okay.
To maintain our leadership role within the industry, BA experts need to increase gross online sales by 15% this fiscal year.
Okay, so that's super specific.
Right, no ambiguity there.
It tells you exactly what they're trying to achieve.
And why it matters to the bigger picture.
Right. Like a compass for the whole project.
Exactly, guiding everyone in the right direction.
Okay, that makes sense.
Now think about your own project, or maybe just, any software you use.
Uh-huh.
What are the business needs behind it?
Yeah, what's the driving force? Okay, so we've talked about business requirements. What's next?
All right, let's move on to stakeholder requirements.
Stakeholder requirements. So we're getting a bit more specific now.
These focus on the people who will actually be using the software.
Oh, so like us, the everyday users.
Exactly. And it can be really tempting to jump right into solutions, the technical stuff, at this stage.
Oh, yeah, like let's build this, let's code that.
Right, but that's a trap.
A trap.
You got to resist the urge.
Okay, why?
Because stakeholder requirements are all about understanding the what before the how.
I see. Like, what are the users actually trying to do?
Precisely. What are their pain points, their needs? What do they want to accomplish?
And then we can figure out the best way to build that.
Exactly. The how comes later.
Okay, so how do we capture these needs, these what's, effectively?
Well, the document recommends using something called user stories.
User stories. I like the sound of that.
They're short, simple statements that put the user at the center.
Okay.
Remember that travel app we were talking about earlier?
Yeah, the one for finding cheap flights.
Right. A user story for that could be something like, as a traveler, I want to easily compare flight prices so I can find the best deals.
Okay, so it's from the user's point of view.
Exactly. And it focuses on what they want to achieve, not how the app does it.
Gotcha, that makes sense.
It's all about clarity and putting the user first.
Okay, so we've covered business requirements, stakeholder requirements. What's next on our list?
All right, now we're getting into the nitty-gritty solution requirements.
Solution requirements. So this is where we define what the software actually does.
Exactly. The features, the capabilities, how it all works together.
Right, and we can break these down into two categories, right?
Yeah. Functional requirements, describing what the software does,
Okay.
and quality requirements, which focus on how well it does it.
So one's about the what, the other's about the how well.
You got it. And this is where clear, measurable requirements are super important.
Especially for things like performance, security, reliability.
Oh, absolutely. Imagine you're building an online banking app.
Okay.
A functional requirement might be the app should allow users to transfer money between accounts.
Right. Pretty basic function for a banking app.
Right, but then a quality requirement could be something like the app should process transactions securely and prevent unauthorized access.
Oh, I see. So one is about the feature itself, the other's about making sure it works properly.
Exactly, no room for error there.
And I bet specific metrics are important here.
Oh yeah, this document even suggests using them whenever possible.
So instead of just saying the app should load quickly,
You might say the app should load core features within 3 seconds, even on slow connections.
much more precise.
Right, no ambiguity there.
Okay, so we've covered 3 types of requirements. What's the last one?
The often overlooked, but super important, transition requirements.
Transition requirements. I don't think I've heard of these before.
They're all about bridging the gap between the old and the new.
Okay, so like when you're implementing new software into an existing setup.
Exactly. Think about things like data migration, training users, integration with other systems.
Oh, right. You don't want to launch this shiny new system and then realize it can't talk to your old databases.
Exactly. Or nobody knows how to use it.
That would be a disaster.
Total chaos.
The document gives an example of like training sales personnel on a new system.
Right, before it goes live.
So for our travel app, a transition requirement could be the app must be able to import data from existing user profiles on the company's website.
Yeah, perfect example. Ensures a smooth transition.
But one important thing, you mentioned earlier that these transition requirements can only be finalized once the solution design is done.
Right, you need to know what you're dealing with before you can plan that transition effectively.
Makes sense. Like you got to know where you're going before you figure out how to get there.
Precisely.
Okay, so we've covered the 4 main types of requirements.
Business, stakeholder, solution, transition,
But the document also presents an alternative framework called
levels and types.
levels and types. I'm curious about this one.
It's like adding another layer of detail to the blueprint, really getting specific.
Okay, so instead of just saying solution requirements,
You might have more categories like user interface requirements, data management requirements, or security requirements.
oh, I see. Breaking it down even further.
Right, making everything more manageable.
Like organizing your closet, you have sections for shirts, pants, shoes.
Exactly. Makes it much easier to find what you need.
And I bet this is super helpful for complex projects.
Absolutely. The levels aspect adds even more depth. Yeah, you might have high-level requirements that define the overall goals, and then you drill down to lower-level ones that get into the specifics of individual features.
I'm starting to see how these two frameworks, the 4 types and the levels and types, can actually work together.
Absolutely. They complement each other.
Like using different lenses to view the project.
Exactly. And you can choose the approach that works best for you.
There's no one right way.
No, it depends on the project, the team, your preferences.
Okay, before we wrap up this section,
Yeah.
the document has this fun little exercise.
I love those.
It says, imagine you're tasked with developing a mobile app for university students to help them manage their academic life, stay organized, and connect with peers.
Okay, a student app. I like it.
So let's brainstorm some potential requirements using the frameworks we've discussed.
Let's put on our developer hats.
All right, developer hats on.
From a business perspective, what do you think a key requirement might be?
Well, I think a major one would be to make sure the app has a wide reach within the student population. Yeah, that's crucial.
To be successful, it needs a large user base.
Absolutely.
So maybe a requirement could be to achieve widespread adoption, the app needs to acquire at least 10,000 active users within the first 6 months of launch.
Perfect. Clear, measurable, tied to business success.
Okay, now let's think about the stakeholders, the students themselves.
What are their biggest needs?
Well, I remember when I was in university, just staying organized was a nightmare.
Tell me about it.
Keeping track of deadlines, assignments, readings, it was a constant struggle.
I feel your pain.
So a crucial stakeholder requirement could be, as a student, I want to easily track my assignment deadlines and receive timely reminders so I never miss a submission.
Excellent. You've captured a specific user need and how the app can solve it.
Starting to see how these different types of requirements fit together.
Yeah, like pieces of a puzzle.
This is really getting my creative juices flowing.
Mine too.
I bet our listeners are coming up with some great ideas as well.
Oh, I'm sure they are. But we've got more ground to cover, so let's take a break here and come back in part 2 to dive deeper into those solution and transition requirements for our student app.
Sounds good. Can't wait.
See you there.
All right. Okay, so where were we? Yes, our student app and those nitty-gritty solution requirements.
Right, the stuff that makes the app actually work.
Exactly. So let's think about our busy students, always on the go.
Constantly running between classes, studying, living that student life.
Exactly. So what features would make their lives easier?
Well, a calendar seems like a no-brainer.
A calendar is essential, but it can't be just any calendar.
Right, it needs to be, super smart.
Smart, intuitive, maybe it syncs with the university's course schedule automatically.
Oh, that would be amazing.
And let students input their own deadlines, reminders, all that stuff.
So no more missed deadlines or double-booked study sessions?
Precisely a student's dream.
Okay, so to put it in solution requirement language,
Yeah.
we could say something like, the app shall synchronize with the university's academic calendar, displaying course schedules, holidays, and important deadlines.
Perfect. That covers the functionality.
Now, what about the quality side of things?
Yes. Performance is critical here.
These students are going to be checking this app all the time, right?
Between classes, on the bus, maybe even with a bad internet connection.
Ugh, I remember those days waiting for an app to load when you're already running late.
The worst. So a quality requirement could be something like the app shall load core features within 3 seconds, even on low bandwidth connections.
It's got to be snappy no matter where they are.
Exactly.
Okay, now let's not forget those transition requirements.
Yes. Bridging the gap between the old and the new.
It's like making sure all the plumbing works when you renovate a house.
Great analogy. So, for example, think about student ID information.
Right, they already have that in the university system.
We need a seamless transition so they can easily log into the app.
No one wants to create a whole new account and remember another password.
Nobody has time for that.
Exactly.
So a transition requirement could be the app shall integrate with the university's existing student authentication system to allow seamless login and data access.
Makes sense. Keeps things simple and user-friendly.
That's the goal.
It's amazing how much thought goes into building an app that really works for the users.
It is. It's all about those details.
Like those apps we use every day, they seem so simple on the surface.
But underneath, there's this whole foundation of requirements.
Right, like a hidden blueprint.
And getting those right, even the small ones, can make all the difference.
Between an app people love and one that just, ends up forgotten.
Absolutely.
Speaking of details, we briefly touched on the levels and types framework earlier.
Yeah, the one that adds even more layers to the blueprint.
Should we spend a bit more time unpacking that?
Sure. So remember how we talked about breaking down requirements into more manageable chunks?
Like organizing a closet?
Exactly. Well, this framework takes that to the next level.
Okay, so instead of just solution requirements.
You might have categories like user interface requirements, data management requirements, security requirements.
It is super specific.
It's all about clarity and organization.
And the levels aspect adds even more depth, right?
Yeah, you have high-level requirements that define the big picture goals.
And then you drill down to lower level ones that get into the specifics of individual features.
Precisely. It's like a hierarchy of requirements.
I'm really starting to see how these two frameworks, the 4 types and the levels and types, can work together.
They're not mutually exclusive. You can use them both.
Like different tools in your toolkit.
Exactly. Choose the one that fits the situation.
So ultimately, there's no one right way to approach this whole requirements thing.
Nope. It depends on the project, the team, the circumstances.
But the important thing is to have a system, some way of defining and managing those requirements effectively.
Absolutely. It's the foundation for building great software.
Okay, this has been a really eye-opening deep dive so far.
It's been fun.
I feel like I'm starting to see the world of software development in a whole new light.
That's what we like to hear.
Before we wrap things up, I'd love to hear your final thoughts on how understanding all this can empower people, even those who aren't, coding experts.
The fascinating thing to me is that understanding software requirements is really about understanding people.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's about figuring out their needs, their motivations, the problems they're trying to solve.
That's a valuable skill in any field, not just software.
Absolutely. Whether you're working on a team, designing a product, or just communicating with others.
It's all about empathy and understanding.
Exactly.
So let's say you're not a developer, but you're giving feedback on a new app.
How can you use this knowledge to be more effective?
Okay, so instead of just saying, I don't like this button, I could say something like, this button is hard to find, and it doesn't really fit with the overall flow of the app.
Exactly. You're framing your feedback in terms of requirements, providing valuable insights.
Not just a personal preference, but something that can actually help improve the app.
You become an active participant in shaping the digital world.
And you don't even need to know how to code.
It's empowering.
This deep dive has been a real revelation.
Glad to hear it.
But we're out of time for today, so we'll be back in part 3 to wrap things up and leave you with some final thoughts on how to apply all this knowledge to your own life.
Sounds good. Looking forward to it.
All right, welcome back for our final deep dive into software requirements.
I feel like we've covered so much ground already.
Yeah, but it's been so fascinating.
It really has. I mean, who knew requirements could be this interesting?
I know, right? Before we started, I thought it was going to be all like dry and technical.
Yeah, like reading a textbook.
But it's actually been so eye-opening.
It is. It's all about understanding people and their needs, ultimately.
Exactly, and how to build things that actually work for them.
Which is a valuable skill no matter what you do, really.
Okay, so before we wrap up, I want to touch on something we talked about earlier.
Uh-huh.
You said understanding software requirements can empower people, even those who aren't, like coding experts.
Right, because it gives you a framework for thinking about problems and solutions.
So let's say you're using a new app or website, and you're not happy with something.
How can you use this knowledge to give better feedback?
Okay, so instead of just saying, I hate this design or this is confusing.
Which, let's be honest, we've all done that.
Oh yeah, for sure.
You can think about it in terms of those requirement types we discuss.
Right, like is this feature actually meeting a real need?
Exactly. Is it aligned with the user's goals? Is it easy to use? Does it perform well?
So you're basically giving feedback that's more like constructive and helpful.
Right. You're not just complaining. You're offering insights that can actually lead to improvements.
So that makes you feel more like empowered, you know?
Absolutely. You're not just a passive user anymore. You're actively shaping the digital world.
I love that.
Yeah.
So any final thoughts before we say goodbye?
Well, just remember that this is just the tip of the iceberg. The world of software is constantly evolving.
There's always more to learn.
But I think this deep dive has given us a good foundation, a new way of thinking about the things we use every day.
Absolutely. It's been a real pleasure diving into this with you.
Likewise, I've enjoyed it immensely.
And a huge thank you to our listeners for joining us.
I appreciate you being here.
If you want to explore further, we've got links to the source material and some additional resources in the show notes.
Don't be shy. Check them out.
And as always, if you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, feel free to reach out to us.
We love hearing from you.
That's a wrap on this deep dive into software requirements. Until next time.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll see you soon.